This is a very momentous day for African Americans here in Tucson because this is the first display of the African American presence in Spanish colonial history that has been put into the Presidio. Today we are beginning a series of exhibitions. Our second one will be in October, and it will cover the whole scope of history of African Americans here in the Southwest. This particular display is about the first non-native person to come to Arizona. His name was Esteban. He would have come to the state in the spring of 1539 as a guide for the Spanish. My colleagues with me today, Andre Newman and Gandhi, will be actually in the courtyard in a few minutes actually giving more detail on the life of Esteban. I just wanted you to know where the display was so you can come in at your leisure and take a look and also describe a few of the elements in it. The unique thing about this particular exhibit is that we have some original works of art. This painting, for example, was just finished this week by a local artist named Joanna Martinez. It's acrylic on oil and oil on wood. She basically took many descriptions from the different books we have researched to find out what Esteban would have looked like the day he reached Zuni. That's a very significant day, which Andre will talk more about because we think he was killed that day. On the top shelf here, we have a cottonwood statue, which is a carving by a Santa Fe artist named Andrew Gonzalez. He used the original methods that they would have used in the 1700s to do this particular cottonwood statue. So for example, the colors come from clay from caves in New Mexico, near Sandia. So the yellow and the red, he used black walnut for the brown of Esteban's face. He added charcoal to it to get the blackness of the hair. And he is most popularly known in Santa Fe for doing statues like this for old missions and churches. So they look like the ones that would have been made by the priests back in the 1700s. So we've tried to recreate something that looks like Esteban would have looked like if he was actually carved by a carver at the time he lived. Nobody really knows what he looked like, but we are trying to capture as much of his essence as possible, and we'll do more of that as we walk outside into the courtyard. Please take your time and look at the exhibit. We really appreciate the support we get from the Tucson Presidio Trust, Parks and Recreation of Tucson, and also from people who have just been so gracious to us to help us with our research, particularly Rick Collins, the director of the Tucson Presidio Trust for Historic Preservation, Gloria Smith, who is a local historian who inspired us to do this kind of work, and especially Jesse Zander, one of our donors, who's given us a very generous donation recently so we can continue our work in this area. So we are called Starline Tours. We do tours, historical research, and promote the history of African Americans in Tucson. So if you're interested in more history like this, we are available to tell stories, to do tours, and to help you understand the history of this part of the world. And remember, though we take an Afrocentric approach to our research, once you look at one group of people, you're looking at everybody at the same time. Because here in the 1700s and in Tucson at the Presidio, this was a culture of cooperation. People had to work together in order to survive because it was a very harsh environment. And that's the story we're trying to get out to young people. You know, I challenge people to think, how many Indian battles were there between 1775 and 1875 when the Indian Wars in Arizona were over? And nobody really knows the number, but there were so few days in which we were really at war. We talk always about them and not the days of peace when we lived here together in harmony. That's the message we should be getting out to our children, not the violence. So we're going to go out into the courtyard, have a seat where the flautists were earlier, and we will continue this presentation and try to give you more information about this character here in the exhibit named Esteban. Thank you.
Bravo.
It is thought that Esteban was born around the year 1500 in Morocco. He was captured by Portuguese slave hunters, probably when he was in his mid-teens, and taken to Spain. And at the age of 27, he joined the expedition of Panfilo de Narvaez. who was a conquistador of sorts who was in competition with Hernando Cortez at the time. Narvaez had a very active role in subduing the Caribbean islands and all of the natives who inhabited the Caribbean islands in the early 1500s. And he had sort of an ongoing rivalry with Cortez to try and, in essence, expand the European, particularly the Spanish influence over the New World. Narvaez in 1527 was ordained by King Charles, or actually at that time Holy Emperor Charles V, who had a great interest in speculating more in the New World. Cortez had come probably about a decade ahead of Narvaez, and he had essentially subdued the region around Mexico City, or present-day Mexico City, where the AAA Alliance, the Aztecs and what have you, had pretty much succumbed to Cortez's military forces, and most of the mineral resources had been exploited in that area for about a decade before Narvaez decided to take on his expedition to Florida. Narvaez in 1527, I don't know how many of you guys can see this, but in 1527, he came about Hispaniola, present-day Dominican Republic, and Haiti. From Hispaniola, he moved on to Cuba and lost probably about 100 of the members of his expedition, because a lot of the folks in this area had already traveled to Florida, and they knew for the most part that the resources in effect were not in Florida, but in the region towards Central America and Mexico City. Narvaez from Trinidad took off around the western coast of Cuba, and he wound up in Tampa Bay, Florida on Good Friday, April the 12th, 1528. He lost an additional 100 members of his expedition, given the fact that one of the boats simply, couldn't make it to the coast of Florida. So he essentially landed with a group of about 300 people in 1528. Of these 300 people, by November of 1528, between April and November, they were down to 4 individuals. Esteban Durantes was one of those 4. There was also a treasurer and historian by the name of Cabeza de Vaca. There was a doctor. There was Esteban's owner, Andres Durantes, and Esteban. This region was not really explored prior to this point. This region essentially had over 1,000 different local dialects, meaning that we're talking hundreds of tribes. It was, for the most part, not inhabited by noble savages or native folks who were in any way hostile. They were supportive, although the 4 men encountered incidences in which they were enslaved, they were tortured, they were held captive for a number of years, and it took them a total of 8 years, between 1528 and 1536, to eventually arrive in, this region of Sonora, which is called Culiacan, is where they first encountered the first Spanish that they had seen since essentially 1527, back in Europe. In this region, they realized that, for the most part, the Viceroy at the time, Mendoza, was interested in further exploration north in order to discover the so-called 7 cities of gold. Esteban, having a tremendous amount of rapport with the native people in the Sonoran region, was granted the position as head of this expedition. He wasn't a military man, he wasn't necessarily a religious man, he simply was a man that knew the culture of the region, and therefore was given the title as head of this expedition. So I'm going to hand it over to my good friend Dondi, who's going to talk more about the latter part of the expedition from 1536 on.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing? All right. So he gave you a good summary of the beginnings of Esteban. And I'm here to show you. In the future, I will be playing Esteban in the upcoming play we're doing. And this is just one of the many looks that have been known of Esteban. You see different pictures of him in the exhibits. Sometimes he looked more colonial, more Spaniard in dress or whatever. And he began to take on more of a native look as time went on, especially once he left Mexico, looking for the 7 cities of gold, right? So, as he left Mexico with the friar, Marcos de Niza, and if I pronounce anything wrong, where's the good doctor? There he is, correct
You're fine.
pronunciation for me. As they left Mexico City, they left with a huge entourage, heading on the western part of Mexico, heading north. They hit all these small and some very large settlements of native Indian people, right? And a lot of these people know him and remember him from the first time coming through. His reputation precedes him, as you say, you know. He was known as very charismatic, a shaman, a healer. People loved him. So as he came and approached these different villages, a lot of people came out for his blessings, bringing their children, coming to bring their sick, and he's traveling with a large caravan, and with them is over 300 Indians, natives. They may say something's politically correct, but that's the way they talk back then, right? So, as he's traveling along, they're heading further up north. When they get to this settlement that Niza called Basapa, is a Bacapa. B-A-C-A-P. Yeah, it sounds like that.
Somebody who speaks better Spanish.
Bacapa. And now this city proves to later on to be like a mystery, because it's like something Fray Niza made up. They don't know of this settlement at this time. But once he gets there, they decide Niza decide that Esteban should go ahead, because he's tired. He don't want to rough it that much. So he sets up camp there, and Esteban continues with 300 native followers and interpreters, right? And so as they go along, once he reaches this other settlement called Corazon, more in the mountains, he's beginning to think that now maybe he's getting further and further away. He's distancing himself from the rest of the column of Spanish conquistadors that's traveling behind. And maybe now, you know, I'm getting farther away than I may to seek freedom or disappear. This would have to be one of the thoughts that is coming through his head after all these years of being in slavery. And now he's coming into his own and seeing this freedom coming upon all these native tribes, seeing the way they're living. They have great irrigations, crops, game. And he said, man, this looks beautiful to me. I'm putting those words in his head, but that's how I'm feeling. Because at this point, nobody knows what is going on. The last European to see him was in Bacapa. That's the last time anyone saw him. So they don't know. But even the Spaniards are thinking also, they're thinking that now he's going so far ahead that maybe now he's going to try to claim riches for himself, which is impossible. He can't do it. If he was to claim land, gold, or Indians, natives for himself, they would all go to his masters. They would all go to the crown of Spain. So that is not his way of thinking at all. He's seen the brutality of the Spaniards. He knows it firsthand. He's seen it with the slaves. He's seen it with the Indians. And he's even seen it the way they behave amongst themselves. So he's most definitely now moving further north, laying more space between him and the good friar, Niza. He hits the Sonora Valley. And coming to this valley, he comes upon a lot of natives that remember him from 4 years ago when he first came through from that 8-year trip. He knows the languages. He performed rituals with them, ceremonies. So he's in good. These people know him. And so they're telling them stories about these people. They call themselves the Cibola. He began to call them the not Cibola, that's the Spanish interpretation, but he pronounced it Cibola, something like that, right? Excuse me, we'll check that again later on. But anyway, so these natives in the Sonora Valley is beginning to tell him about all these beautiful things that the Zuni people, who's I'm actually talking about, the Zunis, the Zuni Pueblos, that they have these beautiful homes made of stone and logs, that they have gems of turquoise, and they are even wearing some of these things in their ears and nose, and they're saying that they traded these things amongst the Zunis. Because the Zunis are known as the central, they're the middleman to everything in all the four directions among the natives, north, south, east, and west. They're trading. These guys are trading, they're shrewd bargainers, but they're very generous people. And so as Esteban hearing about this, he continues with his entourage. So they head up the San Pedro River, north. And along the San Pedro River, there's, once again, many more beautiful settlements. Natives living good, living rich lives there. Bountiful lives. He passed on through. And then he comes into a rough spot, going more into the mountains. He hit along the Mongolan,
Gila.
huh?
The Gila.
Where he hit the Gila River, and then what's that rim?
Rim.
Right. They named that after one governor from New Mexico, right? So he hits this rim, and there's no inhabitants. But he's only now a day or so away from the Zuni settlements. From there, he decided to send in 2 messengers, and they say, and once again, this is all hearsay. Even in history, the Spaniards don't even know. But in their books, this is what they said. They said that he sent his gourd, which you guys saw a representation of it over there in the room there. Gourd with the red and white feather was a symbol of him coming as a peaceful man, as a shaman, and as a representation of the Spaniards. When these messengers go and meet the elders of the Zuni nations, supposedly they got angry and they crashed it, they smashed it to the ground. They said, we don't want y'all coming here. We've heard about you. Along the way, many of the natives, the Indians along Sonora, they had heard also, but they had not yet seen the Europeans. But they've been hearing about these strangers, these foreigners coming. And so once you get there to the Zunis know also too. Like I said, they're in the center of all things that was trade going on back and forth from all the 4 directions, right? And so they say they rejected him. So the messengers came back to tell Esteban. And Esteban couldn't believe it. He's like, well, you know, what's the deal with this? So they said, man, we should probably go back. This is hearsay once again. But Esteban decided, no, we must make contact with these guys. So he decided to move towards the city. He's going to go to the city. When he gets there, supposedly they stopped him from coming into the city and decided to house him outside the city while the elders decide on his fate and what they're going to do with the situation. For 3 days, they meet and talk and reason about this. Well, one of the scouts come back, one of the messengers who tells part of this story comes back to where the friar is, Marcos de Niza, and he tells him that he was down at the stream drinking water. And when he looked up, he saw Esteban running. And behind him was a bunch of Zunis with archers. And they had already shot some of their other entourage. And they was chasing Esteban. That's one story. A couple of days later, 2 more guys come back to Niza. And they tell him that Esteban was dead. And they came back, from the stories, they came back bloodied and wounded and said they had been attacked. Right? And so de Niza takes this, that he was killed, and he actually goes back towards Mexico. Even though he writes that he went further, but hardly any scholar believes that he went further, okay? A lot of these guys are telling a lot of big stories, you know, to make themselves look good so that they can receive some rewards once they get back to the viceroy as a governor of what they call a New Spain now, right? So, that's the historical part of the books that he was killed, right? Now, see, I came here today to give my personal view of things, all right? And by doing that, first I'm going to give you a little personal history of myself. My name is Don DeMargo. I am truly what you call an American. I'm 40% African, 30% Native American, 26% European, and 4% Asian. All right? Heinz 57. You don't get more American than that. True DNA, right? And during my lifetime, especially during my teenage years and early 20s and what, I've lived among many different Native American people, and still continue to. A lot with the Navajo people up in Chinle, and also with the Pueblo people, not the Zunis, but the ones a little further up are the Walatoas in Hemus Spring. Hemus, but they call themselves the Walatoa. So, I'm today continually and still is involved in doing ceremonies with these natives, the Indians. I'm part of the family amongst these people, and with the traditions, and being there and seeing how they live and how they are, and I can't put a thing on all of them, but on the ones I've come in contact with. It's hard for me to believe this story. It's very hard for me to believe this story, that the Zunis would just outright kill a person, no matter what color it was, but would just outright kill this person and not hear him out, not even see him. The Pueblo people that I've come in contact, and even other natives of the Navajos who have gone to ceremonies, because the Pueblo people are very open and inviting. Everyone can come and see their ceremonies, participate in their feast days. Whereas in a lot of tribes, it's not like that. Oh no. If you're not a native blood, you're not invited to many of these things. All right? But among the Pueblo people, they're very inviting. They welcome everyone. And the Navajos that I was with, they saw this and they couldn't believe it. It's like, wow, these guys are too friendly. They was nervous, actually. It's like, man, I don't get this. They're a little too friendly for my taste. They thought something was up. It's the honest truth, you know. They said, whoa, because they are not that way. And being around Navajos, being around Lakotas, being around Iroquois, the other nations of New York, not as much as I experienced with the Pueblo. Not to say that they cannot be warlike, because they had the Pueblo Revolt, right? Do you know about that? 1600s. So everybody get pushed to a certain, pushed with their back against the wall. Eventually, have to release things. So everybody has the ability, or what is what I'm saying, the mindset, they have to fight, right? Fight for the right. But in this case with Esteban, I find it very difficult that he was not even seen. And if you talk to anyone, especially if you talk to a black person, I was just telling my daughter in Denver this story this morning. And I told her this story, and I said, "What?" I said, "Esteban disappeared." She said, "Yeah, he left." All of a sudden, he's a free man. He has all this power. He's been traveling like a rock star. Started in Mexico when he comes back from that 8-year trip. Everybody's taking him to parties. They want to hear his stories. They got him dressed up in all the finery that you can see of that time. And he's more popular than conquistadors, the Spaniards. He got it from a whole different perspective. So, from my personal view, and this is only my personal view, but I bet if I ask anyone here what you think happened with Esteban, remember they never found the body. In a court of law, what's that already? What is it called? Preach. They never found a body. Not to say, you know, maybe the body was scattered somewhere. Who knows? But nobody knows. I'm going to say in my heart and soul, from my experiences, I believe he disappeared and faded out into the populace, whether it was the Zuni Pueblos or moved on, but he lives on somewhere. His descendants are somewhere. That's my take. Thank you all very much.
I want to suggest to anyone that like to do their own research, we have a number of books that we used for pretty much formulate this presentation. We only gave you a little tidbit, but this book called Brutal Journey by Paul Schneider is an excellent resource. It gives you a lot of the, I guess, European conquistador history that sort of predated Esteban's expedition. Another one which has a small segment of Esteban in it called The Black Military History in the American West by John Carroll. Another excellent resource. The Black West by William Loren Katz. This has an even smaller segment, but again, you know, really good resource. And last but not least, you don't have the book here, but there's a book, yeah, in the case, in fact, in the display case called Crossing the Continent by James Goodwin. Charles Goodwin. And this book actually has a lot of the information that would have us sort of speculate on Esteban's final days. Thank you very much.
Thank you again for coming and seeing the opening of this exhibit. We hope that you tell your friends that it's here. We will continue with exhibits like this. The next opening will be in October of this year. We'll try to span on another whole portion of African American history in the Southwest. And we again want to thank our sponsors, the Tucson Presidio Trust for Historic Preservation, the Parks and Recreation for their assistance in doing this. Those of you who didn't get to see the exhibit, it is in the North Gallery. It'll be here until the end of the month. And we again thank you very much for coming.